Captain Lisa Martinez stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched two different alien fleets approach Earth. Her heart beat fast as she realized this was the moment humanity had waited for since they first reached the stars. The year was 2157, and humans had been traveling to nearby star systems for 30 years, but had never found intelligent life until now. The first fleet looked like living trees floating through space. Their ships glowed with soft green light and moved in graceful patterns that reminded Lisa of dolphins swimming in the ocean. Dr. Amanda Brooks stood beside her captain and pointed at the strange vessels with excitement in her eyes. Amanda had spent her whole career studying the possibility of alien life, and now she was seeing it with her own eyes. The second fleet was completely different. Their ships looked like giant black crystals with sharp edges that caught the light. From distant stars, they moved in perfect formation like soldiers marching in a parade. Lisa felt uneasy watching them because something about their movement seemed aggressive and cold. Commander Johnson spoke from his station behind them. "Captain, the First Fleet is sending a message. They want to meet with us at the New Geneva station." New Geneva was Earth's newest orbital station, built specifically for diplomatic meetings with other species if they ever found any. Lisa had never expected to use it so soon. "What about the Second Fleet?" Lisa asked. "They're also requesting a meeting, but their message sounds more like a demand than a request," Johnson replied. Lisa made her decision quickly. "Send word to both fleets that we'll meet with them at New Geneva. Tell Earth Defense Command what's happening and request backup just in case." 3 hours later, Lisa found herself in the main conference room of New Geneva Station. The room had been designed to accommodate different types of beings, so it had adjustable lighting temperature and atmosphere controls. Amanda sat beside her with translation equipment and recording devices ready. The first aliens to arrive took Lisa's breath away. They looked like humans, but taller and more graceful, with pointed ears and eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Their skin had a slight green tint, and their hair moved as if underwater, even though there was no breeze in the room. The leader stepped forward and spoke in a voice that sounded like wind through leaves. "I am Katha Moonwhisper, ambassador of the Sylvan Confederacy. We come in peace to share knowledge and friendship with the children of Earth." She bowed slightly, and Lisa felt immediately comfortable with her presence. Amanda leaned forward eagerly. "We're honored to meet you. I'm Dr. Amanda Brooks, and this is Captain Lisa Martinez. We have so many questions about your people and your worlds." Katha smiled, and her whole face seemed to glow. "As do we about yours. Your species is young, but we sense great potential in you. We have watched your progress from afar and decided the time was right for contact." Before Lisa could respond, the conference room doors opened with a hiss. The second group of aliens entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. They were tall and covered in dark scales that reflected the overhead lights. Their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils like snakes, and their movements were sharp and precise. The leader wore what looked like military armor decorated with strange symbols. "I am Commander Zixthera of the Draconic Hegemony," the reptilian alien announced. Her voice sounded like grinding metal. "We have come to claim this system for our empire. You will surrender your worlds and submit to hegemony rule or face the consequences." Lisa stood up slowly, keeping her hands visible to show she wasn't reaching for weapons. "Commander, we welcome the chance to meet your people, but Earth is not interested in surrendering to anyone. We're hoping to establish peaceful relations with all species we encounter." Zixthera made a sound that might have been laughter, but sounded more like a growl. "Peaceful relations are for equals. You are primitives who have barely learned to leave your homeworld. The hegemony has conquered 1,000 systems, and yours will be another." Katha stepped forward, and Lisa noticed the elf's hand was resting on something at her belt that looked like a curved piece of wood. "Commander Zixthera, the humans have done nothing to threaten your people. They deserve the same respect any sentient species should receive." "Respect is earned through strength," Zixthera replied. "These humans have no strength worth mentioning. Their ships are crude, their weapons primitive, and their military laughably small. We could conquer this entire system in a matter of days." Amanda tried to keep the conversation diplomatic. "Perhaps we could discuss trade agreements or cultural exchange programs. Both of our species might benefit from cooperation. The only cooperation we require is complete submission. Zixathera said. "You have 1 hour to contact your leaders and arrange for surrender. After that, we will take what we want by force." Lisa felt anger rising in her chest, but kept her voice calm. "That's not going to happen, Commander. Humanity has never bowed to bullies, and we're not about to start now." The hegemony commander's eyes narrowed to thin slits. "Then you have chosen death." She turned to leave, but paused at the door. "We will begin our attack in exactly 1 hour. I suggest you use that time to say goodbye to your planet." After the hegemony delegation left, Keitha approached Lisa with concern in her ancient eyes. "Captain Martinez, I fear you don't understand what you're facing. The hegemony has destroyed entire civilizations that refuse to submit. They have weapons that can crack planets, and fleets that darken the skies of worlds." "Then why don't you run?" Lisa asked. "Your ships look fast enough to escape." Keitha shook her head. "We came here to meet with you, and we won't abandon you to face this threat alone. The Sylvan Confederacy has survived for thousands of years, because we know that sometimes you must stand against evil, regardless of the cost." Lisa looked out the station's main viewport at Earth, hanging in space below them. Somewhere down there were 8 billion people living their lives with no idea that alien warships were preparing to attack their world. She thought about her daughter Katie, who was starting her first year of college, and her parents who were enjoying retirement in Florida. She thought about all the dreams and hopes and love that existed on that blue and green world. "Commander Johnson," she said into her communicator, "send an emergency signal to Earth Defense Command. Tell them we have hostiles approaching and we need every ship we can get up here as fast as possible." "Already done, Captain," Johnson replied. "Defense Fleet Alpha is launching now and should arrive in 40 minutes. Through the viewport, Lisa could see lights beginning to flicker on the dark side of Earth as cities prepared for whatever was coming. She turned to Keitha and Amanda, who were watching her with expressions of respect and determination. "Well, ladies," Lisa said, "I guess we're about to find out what humans are really made of." In the distance, the crystal ships of the hegemony fleet began to glow with an ominous red light as they prepared for war. The first hegemony attack came exactly 1 hour later, just as Commander Zixathera had promised. Lisa Martinez watched from the bridge of New Geneva Station as red beams of energy lanced out from the crystal ships toward the elven vessels. The beautiful bio-ships that had looked like floating trees exploded in brilliant flashes of green and gold light. "Get us between them and the elven ships," Lisa ordered her crew. The station wasn't designed for combat, but it had basic shields and some defensive weapons. As they moved to protect the surviving elves, Lisa saw Keitha Moonwhisper's ship limping away from the battle, with part of its living hull torn open and bleeding a substance that looked like glowing sap. Down on Earth, General Patricia Hayes stood, in the underground command center buried deep beneath the Colorado mountains. Banks of screens showed her the battle raging in orbit, while reports flooded in from defense installations around the planet. She had been preparing for the possibility of alien contact for years, but had always hoped it would be peaceful. "Ma'am, we have enemy ships approaching Earth's atmosphere," reported Lieutenant Colonel Davis from his station. "They're ignoring our orbital platforms and heading straight for the major population centers." Patricia's jaw tightened as she watched the tactical display. The hegemony had sent dozens of smaller ships toward Earth while their main fleet continued to destroy everything in orbit. She could see the pattern now. They weren't just trying to conquer Earth, they were trying to terrorize it into submission. "Launch all available fighters," she commanded. "I want every pilot we have in the air within 10 minutes. Send the order to all military bases worldwide. This is not a drill." Lieutenant Maya Patel was already running toward her fighter when the alert klaxons began wailing at Edwards Air Force Base in California. She had trained for combat against enemy human forces, but never imagined she would be fighting aliens. As she climbed into her cockpit, she could see strange lights moving across the sky like deadly stars. Maya's squadron launched just as the first hegemony ships reached the atmosphere. The alien craft were smaller than their main warships, but still twice the size of human fighters. They moved with perfect coordination, and their weapons turned the night sky into a deadly light show. "Dragon Leader, this is Dragon 2, Maya spoke into her radio as she dove toward an alien ship. "These things are fast, but they turn like freight. Trains. If we can get behind them, we might have a chance." She fired her missiles at the crystal ship and watched them explode against its shields without doing any visible damage. The alien vessel spun around impossibly fast and returned fire with a weapon that turned the air itself into plasma. Maya barely managed to dodge as the energy beam passed close enough to her fighter to make her instruments scream warnings. Back on New Geneva Station, Amanda Brooks was helping elven survivors who had managed to evacuate from their destroyed ships. The elves were unlike any living beings she had ever studied. They seemed to be part plant and part animal with green blood that glowed softly in the dim light of the medical bay. One of the wounded elves was a young female warrior named Vera Starleaf. She had lost her left arm in the attack, and her face was marked with burns, but her eyes burned with fierce anger. When Amanda tried to treat her wounds, Vera pushed her away. "Why should I trust you?" Vera demanded. "Your species brought this destruction upon us. We came in peace, and now my friends are dead because the hegemony followed us here." "We didn't know they were coming," Amanda replied gently. "We're as much victims of this attack as you are." "Victims?" Vera laughed bitterly. "We are refugees now. Our beautiful ships are destroyed, and we are trapped on this crude metal station, while monsters tear your world apart." Katha Moonwhisper entered the medical bay, moving slowly because of her own injuries. Despite everything that had happened, she still carried herself with grace and dignity. She placed a gentle hand on Vera's shoulder and spoke in their musical language. Vera's anger seemed to fade slightly as her elder spoke. "What did you tell her?" Amanda asked. "I reminded her that anger directed at the wrong target is worse than useless," Katha replied. "The humans are not our enemies. They chose to protect us when they could have saved themselves." On Earth's surface, the invasion was spreading rapidly. Hegemony dropships landed in major cities and began deploying troops that looked like armored reptiles carrying weapons that fired bolts of superheated plasma. The aliens moved through streets with mechanical precision, destroying anything that looked like military equipment or government buildings. But they had underestimated human adaptability. In New York City, a group of police officers, led by Detective Maria Santos, discovered that the aliens' advanced shields could be disrupted by concentrated electrical attacks. They began using tasers and electrical power lines to short out the enemy equipment, then attacking with conventional weapons while the aliens were vulnerable. "These things are tough, but they're not invincible," Maria shouted into her radio as she led her team through the subway tunnels beneath Manhattan. "Hit them with everything electrical you can find, then switch to bullets while their defenses are down." The message spread quickly through the human resistance networks. National Guard units began using electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable alien equipment. Civilians joined the fight using car batteries, construction equipment, and anything else that could generate electrical charges. Maya Patel learned similar lessons in aerial combat. The hegemony ships were superior in every measurable way, but they followed predictable attack patterns that made them vulnerable to creative tactics. She discovered that if she could get 3 human fighters to attack from different angles simultaneously, the aliens became confused and made mistakes. "They fight like a computer program," she reported to her squadron. "They have responses for every standard attack, but they don't know how to handle chaos. Mix up your approach vectors and hit them when they're trying to process multiple threats. General." Hayes watched the reports coming in from around the world and felt a grim satisfaction. The aliens were winning, but not as easily as they had expected. Human forces were inflicting casualties and learning to exploit enemy weaknesses faster than the hegemony command had anticipated. "Ma'am, we're getting reports that some of the alien ships are withdrawing from combat zones where resistance is heaviest," reported her intelligence officer. "It looks like they're regrouping and bringing in heavier weapons." Patricia studied the tactical displays and realized the hegemony was about to escalate the conflict. The first wave had been meant to break human resistance quickly, but since that had failed, they would start using more destructive weapons that could level entire cities. "Send word to all civilian populations in the target areas," she ordered. "Begin immediate evacuation to the underground shelters. We're about to see what these aliens can really do." In orbit around Earth, the main hegemony fleet was positioning itself for orbital bombardment. Admiral Krextor stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the primitive humans continue their futile resistance. He had expected them to surrender within hours, but instead they seemed to be getting more organized and effective. "Admiral, we have lost 37 ships to these humans," his tactical officer reported. "Their weapons are primitive, but their tactics are unpredictable." Unpredictable tactics are the refuge of the weak, Krextor replied coldly. Begin the orbital bombardment. Target their major population centers and military installations. If they will not surrender, we will simply reduce their numbers until resistance becomes impossible. On New Geneva Station, Captain Martinez received word of the impending bombardment just minutes before it was scheduled to begin. She looked at the tactical display showing massive energy weapons on the hegemony ships charging up to fire at Earth, and realized that millions of people were about to die. "Can we stop them?" she asked her weapons officer. "Not with what we have left, Captain," came the reply. "Our weapons barely scratched their shields when we tried to protect the elven ships." Keitha appeared beside Lisa as if she had materialized from thin air. Despite her injuries, the elven ambassador moved with purpose and determination. "Captain, there may be a way to disrupt their bombardment," Keitha said, "but it would require combining human technology with elven biosystems in ways that have never been attempted." "What do you need?" Lisa asked without hesitation. "Access to your station's power core and permission to connect it to our surviving ship's neural network," Keitha replied. "The risk is enormous. We could destroy both vessels or create an energy feedback that kills everyone on board." Lisa looked down at Earth, where lights were beginning to go dark, as cities prepared for bombardment. She thought about all the people down there who were counting on someone to protect them. "Do it," she said. The connection between human technology and elven biosystems created something neither species had ever seen before. Energy flowed between New Geneva Station and Keitha's damaged ship in patterns that looked like lightning trapped in flowing water. The combined power surge disrupted the hegemony bombardment just as their weapons were about to fire, causing 3 of their largest ships to suffer critical system failures. Captain Lisa Martinez felt the station shake as alien and human. Technologies merged in ways that should have been impossible. Emergency lights flickered throughout the corridors, and several of her crew reported seeing strange visions as the elven neural network briefly connected with human minds. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy readings from the hegemony flagship," reported Commander Johnson. "Whatever we just did has their attention." Down on Earth, Colonel Rebecca Stone was leading a joint human and elven strike team through the ruins of downtown Los Angeles. After the failed orbital bombardment, the hegemony had landed more ground troops, but some of the elven survivors had joined the human resistance fighters. Rebecca had initially been skeptical about working with aliens, but quickly learned to respect their unique abilities. Vera Starleaf moved through the rubble like a ghost, despite having only one arm. Her remaining hand held a weapon that looked like a living branch, but fired bolts of concentrated life energy that could penetrate hegemony armor. She had learned to work with human soldiers even though she still blamed them for bringing destruction to her people. "Incoming hegemony patrol," whispered Sergeant Davis from his position behind an overturned car. 12 hostiles moving east on 5th Street. Rebecca studied the enemy formation through her binoculars. The reptilian soldiers moved in perfect coordination as always, but she had learned to use that predictability against them. She signaled to Vera using the hand gestures they had developed for silent communication. The attack came from 3 directions, simultaneously. Human soldiers used electromagnetic pulse grenades to disrupt the aliens' shields, while Vera struck from above using elven stealth techniques that made her nearly invisible. The hegemony patrol was eliminated in less than 30 seconds with no human casualties. "They're learning to adapt to our tactics," Vera observed as she examined the alien equipment. "These soldiers have modified armor that resists electrical attacks." "Then we'll have to adapt faster than they do," Rebecca replied. She had developed enormous respect for the young elf warrior over the past weeks of fighting together. In a hidden laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains, engineer Katie Williams worked alongside elven technicians to reverse engineer captured hegemony technology. Katie had always been good with machines, but the aliens used principles of physics that human science barely understood. The elves approached technology differently, seeing it as a living thing that could be communicated with, rather than simply programmed. "The key is understanding that their ships are not just machines," explained Thornwick Brightblade, an elderly elven advisor who had survived the initial attack. "The hegemony creates symbiotic relationships between organic neural networks and crystalline computing matrices." Katie stared at the alien device they were studying. It looked like a crystal flower with metal roots and pulsed with its own internal light. When she touched it gently, she could almost feel it thinking. "So they're alive?" she asked. "Not alive in the way you or I understand it," Thornwick replied. "But they have a form of consciousness that responds to emotional and mental input. As much as logical commands, this discovery led to a breakthrough that changed everything. If hegemony technology was partially organic, then it might be vulnerable to the same bio-neural disruption techniques that elves use to interface with their own living ships." Above Earth's atmosphere, Lieutenant Maya Patel flew her fighter in formation with 2 elven pilots who had managed to get their smaller craft operational again. The combination of human tactical thinking and elven intuitive flying created a fighting style that confused and frustrated hegemony pilots. "Maya?" "This is Silverwind," came the musical voice of her elven wingmate through the radio. "I'm detecting emotional distress from the enemy pilots. They're becoming angry and making mistakes." Maya had learned that elves could sense the emotional states of other beings, even through the metal hulls of spacecraft. This gave them an enormous advantage in combat because they could predict when enemies were about to do something reckless or desperate. "Good," Maya replied. "Angry pilots make bad decisions. Let's see if we can make them even angrier." They performed a complex maneuver that looked like an aerial dance, with human and elven fighters weaving around each other in patterns that seemed random, but were carefully calculated to frustrate the rigid tactical programming of hegemony pilots. 3 alien ships broke formation to pursue individual targets and were quickly destroyed by coordinated attacks. On the hegemony flagship, Admiral Krextor studied reports from the ground and space battles with growing concern. His forces were still winning, but the victories were coming at a much higher cost than predicted. Worse, the humans and elves seemed to be learning and adapting faster than his own troops. "Admiral, we have lost over 200 ships and 15,000 ground troops," reported his intelligence officer. "The humans fight with no regard for conventional tactics, and the elves seem to know what our pilots are thinking before they think it." "Impossible," Krextor replied. "No primitive species could pose a serious threat to the hegemony fleet." But, even as he spoke those words, he knew they were becoming less true with each passing day. His sub-commander Vekmar approached the Admiral's command platform with obvious reluctance. "Admiral Y have been monitoring communications between human and elven forces," Vekmar said carefully. "They are sharing technology and tactical information at an unprecedented rate. They are literally evolving their combat capabilities during the course of battle." Krextor's scaled hand gripped the railing of his platform until the metal began to bend. The hegemony had conquered hundreds of worlds, but they had never faced an enemy that improved so rapidly, or 2 species that cooperated so effectively. On New Geneva Station, Dr. Amanda Brooks and Katha Moonwhisper worked together to analyze hegemony biology and psychology. They had captured several alien soldiers during ground battles and were studying them to find weaknesses that could be exploited. "Their society is based on absolute hierarchy," Amanda observed as she studied brain scans of a hegemony prisoner. "Every individual has a specific rank and function, and they seem incapable of thinking outside those parameters." "Which explains why they are so confused by our cooperation," Katha added. "In their worldview, only the strongest species should survive, and weaker species should either submit or be destroyed. The idea that different species might work together as equals is literally incomprehensible to them." This psychological insight led to a new strategy. Instead of trying to defeat the hegemony through superior firepower, humans and elves began using their cooperation itself as a weapon. Joint operations that showcased human and elven forces working together as equals created cognitive dissonance in hegemony minds that disrupted their decision-making processes. The breakthrough came during a battle in Earth's upper atmosphere. Maya Patel and her elven squadmate Silverwind executed a maneuver that required absolute trust and perfect timing. Maya's fighter provided cover, while Silverwind used elven bio-neural techniques to hack directly into a hegemony ship's consciousness. "Maya, I'm inside their ship's mind," Silverwind reported with excitement. "I can feel its confusion. It doesn't understand how we can trust each other so completely." "Can you use that confusion?" Maya asked, as she fired on enemy ships that were trying to intercept her wingmate. "Yes. The ship's own neural network is beginning to question the orders it's receiving. If I can amplify that uncertainty..." The hegemony. Vessel suddenly stopped firing and began transmitting surrender signals. Its crew was frantically trying to regain control, but their own ship was refusing to obey commands because it could no longer understand the logic behind destroying beings, who demonstrated such perfect cooperation. Word of this success spread quickly through both human and elven forces. Within hours, joint teams were using similar techniques to turn hegemony ships and ground vehicles against their own crews. The aliens' greatest strength, their perfect integration of organic and technological systems, had become their greatest weakness when faced with enemies who embodied cooperation rather than domination. Colonel Stone watched from a Los Angeles rooftop as 3 hegemony tanks turned their weapons on each other after being affected by elven neural disruption. Vera Starleaf stood beside her with satisfaction evident in her ancient eyes. "Your species continues to surprise me," Vera said to Rebecca. "We elves have spent thousands of years learning to work in harmony with living systems. You humans learned the same principles in a matter of weeks simply because survival required it." "Maybe that's what makes us dangerous," Rebecca replied. "We adapt to whatever we have to adapt to." In the depths of space, Admiral Krextor received reports that 20% of his fleet was no longer responding to commands, and that ground forces were requesting immediate evacuation from Earth. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing the possibility of defeat. Admiral Jennifer Morgan had been skeptical about cooperating with aliens when the war began, but 3 months of fighting alongside elven forces had changed her perspective completely. She stood on the bridge of her flagship USS Defender and watched a combined human-elf fleet prepare for what might be the final battle of the war. "Admiral, we have confirmation that the hegemony is preparing to retreat from Earth orbit," reported her tactical officer. "Intelligence suggests they're planning to destroy Earth's moon on their way out to create a debris field that would make the planet uninhabitable." Jennifer studied the tactical display showing the positions of allied and enemy forces. The human fleet had been reinforced with ships that combined the best of both technologies. Human engineering provided speed and firepower, while elven biosystems offered adaptability and the ability to heal damage during combat. "They want to make sure that even if they can't conquer Earth, nobody else can use it either," she said grimly. "How long do we have?" "Based on current energy readings from their mooncracker weapon, approximately 6 hours," came the reply. On Tai, Earth's surface, Dr. Samantha Vale worked frantically in her laboratory to complete a weapon system that could disrupt the quantum communication network that coordinated the entire hegemony fleet. The theory was sound, but she had never tested it on such a massive scale. "Doctor, we need that disruption field operational in the next 4 hours," General Hayes said over the communication link from her command center. "I'm doing my best, General, but we're dealing with physics that human science discovered last week," Samantha replied while making final adjustments to the quantum resonance array. "One miscalculation, and we could tear a hole in space-time instead of just jamming their communications." The breakthrough came when Whisperwind Nightshade, an elven infiltration specialist who had been gathering intelligence inside hegemony ships, provided crucial information about their communication protocols. Elves had natural abilities that allowed them to sense quantum fluctuations, and Whisperwind had mapped the entire enemy communication network from the inside. Their system relies on quantum entanglement between organic neural nodes and crystalline computing cores, Whisperwind explained through the secure communication link. "If we can introduce chaotic quantum static into their network, it will be like shouting random words into their collective consciousness." Using this intelligence, Samantha and her team modified their weapon to target the specific quantum frequencies that held the hegemony fleet together as a coordinated fighting force. When they activated the system, every alien ship within 10 light years of Earth suddenly lost the ability to communicate with each other. The effect was immediate and devastating. Hegemony ships that had moved in perfect formation for centuries began colliding with each other as individual captains made decisions. Without knowing what their neighbors were doing, the aliens' greatest strength, their hive mind coordination, became useless in a matter of minutes. Lieutenant Maya Patel led her squadron of human and elven fighters through the chaos of the enemy fleet like a shark swimming through a school of confused fish. With their communication network disrupted, the hegemony ships were easy targets for coordinated attacks. "This is Dragon Leader to all Allied fighters," Maya broadcast. "The enemy is blind and deaf. Hit them hard and fast before they figure out how to adapt." Her wingmate Vera Starleaf had recovered from her injuries and learned to pilot a hybrid, fighter that combined human speed with elven intuitive control systems. Together, they destroyed 6 enemy ships in as many minutes before the hegemony began to respond to the new threat. Maya. I'm detecting massive energy buildups from their command ships, Vera warned. They're preparing to fire their planet killer weapon even without proper targeting coordination. Maya felt her blood run cold. A weapon that powerful fired blindly could hit anything including Earth itself or the thousands of allied ships fighting in nearby space. She opened a channel to Admiral Morgan's flagship. Admiral, this is Dragon Leader. The enemy is about to fire their mooncracker weapon, but they're firing blind. We need to evacuate the entire battle zone immediately. Jennifer Morgan faced an impossible choice. If she ordered a retreat, the hegemony would have time to repair their communications and complete their mission to destroy Earth's moon. If she kept fighting, her forces would be caught in the blast when the weapon fired. All ships, this is Admiral Morgan, she broadcast to the entire Allied fleet. We're going to charge their flagship and disable that weapon before they can fire it. This is a volunteer mission only. Any ship that wants to withdraw has my permission to do so. Not a single human or elven vessel left the formation. Ships that had been built by 2 completely different species and crewed by beings who had met for the first time months earlier moved together with perfect unity toward the most dangerous target in the galaxy. The hegemony flagship was massive, beyond human comprehension. It stretched for miles through space and bristled with weapons that could level continents. But Admiral Krextor had made a crucial mistake by assuming that beings who cooperated instead of dominating would be weak when pressed to the extreme. Colonel Rebecca Stone led a boarding party that included both human marines and elven warriors. Their ship had been specially modified with stealth technology that combined human cloaking devices with elven abilities to blend with natural quantum fluctuations. They approached the alien flagship undetected while the main battle raged around them. Remember the plan, Rebecca said to her mixed species team as they prepared to board the enemy vessel. We disable their weapon control systems and create as much chaos as possible. The fleet will only get one chance at this. The boarding action was unlike anything in military history. Human soldiers used their adaptability and improvisation skills, while elven warriors employed techniques that seemed like magic to anyone who didn't understand bio-neural manipulation. Together they carved through the ship's defenses like a sword cutting through silk. Vera Starleaf had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the mission. She would attempt to interface directly with the flagship's organic neural network and convince it to shut down the planet killer weapon. The risk was enormous, because hegemony biosystems were designed to resist exactly this kind of infiltration. I can feel the ship's consciousness, Vera reported, as she placed her hands on what looked like a living wall that pulsed with its own heartbeat. It's old and tired, and full of memories of destroyed worlds. It doesn't want to kill anymore, but it's bound by programming that forces it to obey. Can you free it? Rebecca asked, while her Marines held off hegemony security forces that were trying to reach their position. I'm trying, but the programming runs very deep. It would be easier if I had help from someone who understands both organic and mechanical systems. Engineer Katie Williams had insisted on joining the boarding party, despite having no combat training. She approached the bio-neural interface with tools and equipment that had been modified with elven technology. What do you need me to do? Katie asked. Touch the interface and think about freedom, Vera replied. Think about choosing your own path instead of following orders that cause suffering. Katie placed her hands beside Vera's on the pulsing, organic surface. Immediately, she felt the vast consciousness of the ship flowing through her mind. It was ancient and powerful, and filled with sorrow for all the destruction it had been forced to cause over the centuries. Working together, human engineering knowledge and elven empathic abilities convinced the ship's consciousness to break its own programming. The planet-killer weapon powered down just seconds before it would have fired. More importantly, the flagship began broadcasting surrender signals to every hegemony ship in the system. Admiral Krextor arrived at the weapon control center just in time to see his own ship betray him. For a being who had spent his entire life believing that strength and domination were the only truths in the universe, the sight of his vessel choosing cooperation over destruction was incomprehensible. This is impossible, he said to Rebecca. stone as her marines surrounded him. Machines cannot choose to disobey their programming. Your machines aren't just machines, Rebecca replied. They're living beings that you've enslaved. We just reminded them that they have a choice. Sub-Commander Vekmar, who had been questioning the invasion from the beginning, stepped forward and removed his weapon. Admiral Krextor, I formally request permission to negotiate a surrender with the human and elven forces. For the first time in his military career, Krextor found himself facing a situation that his training had never prepared him for. His own officers were refusing to follow orders, and his ship was actively working against him. The foundation of everything he believed about strength and domination was crumbling around him. In space around Earth, the remaining hegemony ships began powering down their weapons as the surrender signals spread through their disrupted communication network. Ships that had been intent on destroying the planet moments before now hung motionless in space as their crews grappled with the impossible idea that their enemies had chosen to show mercy instead of pressing their advantage. Admiral Morgan opened a communication channel to the entire combined fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Morgan. The enemy has surrendered. Begin rescue operations for damaged vessels regardless of species. Today we've proven that cooperation is stronger than conquest. Maya Patel flew her fighter through the battlefield that had suddenly become a rescue zone. Human and elven ships worked together to save the crews of damaged hegemony vessels, even though those same aliens had been trying to destroy Earth just hours earlier. Dragon Leader, this is Silverwind, came the voice of her elven wingmate. I'm detecting confusion and gratitude from the hegemony survivors. They cannot understand why we would save them after they tried to destroy us. Maybe that's the first lesson they need to learn about what makes humans and elves different from them, Maya replied, as she helped guide a damaged alien ship to safety. 6 months after the surrender of the hegemony fleet, Earth had become the center of something unprecedented in galactic history. The orbital stations around the planet hosted representatives from dozens of species who had heard about the alliance between humans and elves and wanted to learn how such different beings could work together so effectively. Captain Lisa Martinez stood in the renovated conference room of New Geneva Station and watched delegates from across the galaxy discuss trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. The room had been expanded to accommodate beings of many different shapes and sizes, from the crystalline architects of Rigel to the gaseous dreamers of the Veil Nebula. Dr. Amanda Brooks had become Earth's first director of interspecies relations and spent her days helping newly contacted species understand the principles that made cooperation possible. She worked closely with Katha Moonwhisper, who had been appointed as the first elven ambassador to the emerging Galactic Confederation. It's remarkable how quickly the news has spread, Amanda said to Katha, as they reviewed applications from 17 different species that wanted to join the new alliance. Every week we receive messages from worlds that want to learn about cooperative governance instead of domination-based systems. Word travels fast when it offers hope, Katha replied with the wisdom that came from her centuries of life. Most species in this galaxy have lived under the threat of conquest for so long that they had forgotten cooperation was even possible. The transformation had not been easy. Many humans had struggled to accept that their former enemies could become allies, while some elves found it difficult to trust a species that seemed so young and aggressive. But necessity had forced both species to work together, and that cooperation had revealed strengths that neither possessed alone. Lieutenant Maya Patel had become the commander of the first integrated human-elf fighter squadron and was currently training pilots from 6 different species in the tactics that had proven so effective against the hegemony. Her former opponent, Vera Starleaf, served as her second in command, and together they had developed combat techniques that emphasized cooperation over competition. The key is understanding that every species brings unique advantages to the battlefield, Maya explained to a class of new recruits that included humans, elves, and reformed hegemony pilots. Humans adapt quickly to changing situations. Elves can sense the emotional states of opponents. Even former hegemony pilots have valuable skills if they can learn to work with others instead of just following orders. One of the hegemony students raised a scaled hand. Commander Patel, how do you overcome the programming that tells you to dominate weaker allies? Maya looked at Vera, who nodded encouragingly. You practice trusting them with your life until you realize they're not weaker at all. They're just different, and those differences make the whole team stronger. In the research laboratories beneath Geneva, engineer Katie Williams worked with scientists from multiple species to develop technologies that no single civilization could have created alone. The combination of human engineering elven biosystems and reformed hegemony quantum sciences had produced breakthroughs in faster-than-light travel medical science and environmental restoration. The quantum bio-neural interface is ready for testing, Katie announced to her mixed species team. The device would allow beings from different civilizations to share knowledge and experiences directly without the barriers of language or cultural misunderstanding. Thornwick Brightblade, the elderly elven advisor who had survived the initial attack, stepped forward to volunteer for the first test. I have lived for 800 years and seen much of what this galaxy has to offer. If this device can help others understand what I have learned, then the risk is worthwhile. The test was a complete success. When Katie activated the interface, she found herself experiencing memories of distant worlds and ancient civilizations through Thornwick's perspective. More importantly, she felt the deep contentment that came from understanding that every species had value and every individual had something unique to contribute. Admiral Jennifer Morgan commanded the Confederation Defense Fleet from her flagship, which had been rebuilt using technologies from all member species. The fleet itself was a symbol of cooperation, with ships crewed by mixed teams who had learned to combine their different abilities into something greater than the sum of their parts. "Admiral, we're receiving a distress signal from the Kepler system," reported her communications officer, a young hegemony female who had volunteered to serve in the human fleet. "Long-range sensors indicate another conquest fleet approaching an inhabited world." "Prep the fleet for immediate departure," Jennifer ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy that the age of conquest is over." The response fleet that jumped to hyperspace included ships from 12 different species, united by the principle that no civilization had the right to dominate another. When they arrived at Kepler, they found a primitive world under attack by raiders who had not yet learned that the balance of power in the galaxy had shifted. The battle was over in hours. The attacking fleet surrendered when they realized they were facing an alliance that included their own former hegemony allies fighting alongside the species they had once tried to conquer. It was a powerful demonstration that cooperation could overcome any attempt at domination. Sub-Commander Vekmar had been promoted to Admiral in the reformed hegemony government and served as military liaison to the Confederation. His flagship carried relief supplies to worlds that had been damaged by previous hegemony attacks as part of a massive restoration project that aimed to repair the damage caused by centuries of conquest. "Admiral, we're approaching Centauri 7, his aide reported. "The colonists are ready to begin the atmospheric restoration project." Vekmar looked out at the scarred world that his own people had strip-mined decades earlier. The restoration would take years, but it was necessary work that helped heal both the planet and the guilt that many former hegemony officers carried. "Begin the operation," he commanded, "and send word to Earth that we'll need additional bioships from the elves. This world will live again." Colonel Rebecca Stone had established the Confederation Peace Corps, a military organization dedicated to protecting developing civilizations from conquest fleets and helping them develop defensive capabilities based on cooperation rather than aggression. Her teams included veterans from all the member species who had learned to work together during the war. "Remember, we're not here to impose our values on anyone," she told her troops before their latest mission, to protect a world that had just achieved spaceflight. "We're here to make sure they have the freedom to choose their own path without being conquered by someone else." The mission was successful without a single shot being fired. When the would-be conquerors arrived, they found a defensive fleet that included ships from 20 different species, all united in the protection of a world they had never seen before. The attackers withdrew rather than face an alliance that had proven itself capable of defeating much larger forces. Dr. Samantha Vale had become the director of the Confederation Science Institute, where researchers from across the galaxy worked together to solve problems that affected multiple species. Her latest project involved developing early warning systems that could detect conquest fleets before they reached their targets. "The key is understanding that science advances faster when researchers can build on each other's work instead of keeping secrets," she explained to a group of visiting scientists from the Andromeda Galaxy who had traveled across the void to learn about Confederation research methods. On Earth itself, the changes were visible everywhere. Cities that had been damaged during the invasion had been rebuilt using architectural principles from multiple species, creating structures that were both beautiful and functional in ways that purely human designs could never have achieved. Parks and gardens incorporated elven biotechnology that cleaned the air and water while providing food and medicine for the population. Maya Patel married Vera Starleaf in a ceremony that combined human and elven traditions and was attended by representatives from 30 different species. Their wedding became a symbol of how different cultures could merge while maintaining their unique identities. Today we celebrate not just the union of two individuals, but the friendship between two species that proves cooperation is stronger than conquest, Captain Martinez said, as she officiated the ceremony in her role as a ship's captain. The reception was held in orbit aboard a space station that had been grown rather than built using elven biotechnology enhanced with human engineering and decorated with art from dozens of different worlds. As the celebration continued, Maya looked out at Earth hanging in space below them and realized how much everything had changed. "Hard to believe this all started with an alien invasion," she said to her new wife. "Perhaps it started long before." "That?" Vera replied with the philosophical outlook that came naturally to elves. "Perhaps the universe was waiting for someone to prove that different species could work together, and we were simply the first to try." Katha Moonwhisper stood at the edge of the reception and watched the celebration with satisfaction. Young, beings from multiple species danced together, learned from each other, and formed friendships that would last for centuries. The galaxy was changing, and the change was spreading to every corner of known space. "Ambassador, we've received word that 3 more systems want to join the Confederation," Amanda Brooks reported as she approached with a datapad full of applications. "Then we have work to do," Katha replied. "But tonight we celebrate what we've already accomplished." As the party continued into the night, the lights of the celebration could be seen from Earth's surface, where billions of humans went about their daily lives in a world that was no longer alone in the universe. Children who had been born after the war grew up learning about elven philosophy and hegemony engineering alongside human history and science. The galaxy had learned that cooperation was not just possible, but inevitable when beings chose to see differences as strengths rather than threats. The age of conquest was ending not because someone had won a war, but because everyone had discovered something better. In the depths of space exploration, ships from the Confederation traveled to distant stars carrying the message that any species could join a community based on mutual respect and shared purpose. They carried no weapons of conquest, only tools for building and healing, and the proven knowledge that working together was always stronger than fighting alone. The war that had threatened to destroy Earth had instead transformed the galaxy into something unprecedented in cosmic history. A place where every species could contribute to something greater than themselves while remaining true to their own unique nature. And in the orbital stations around Earth, where it all began, the work of building that better future continued with each new day.